Hi everyone, this is Pierrick from P2 Design. In this video I will share some tricks and tips on how I've animated this character for NOARA. Let's get started. I will show you the different steps I've taken to animate the whole character, and I will share with you some tips to get this nice and smooth animation of the tail, of the rope on the belt, but also how to fix head rotation when doing such a complicated movement. Let's get started. So for this one I will start as usual by blocking the main poses. I always start from the idle. Since we are in a game, we need to start from this pose because our character will make a transition from the idle to the attack stance. The second thing I have to take care of is that I won't have that much frame to do the anticipation. The idea is that whenever the player is launching the attack, the character must attack almost instantly. In this regard, in our game, the hit or the release when it's a throw action generally occur between frame 15 and frame 20. And we are using a 30 frame per second tempo. One thing you may have noticed previously is that I've set an option in my ring that allows me to hide the tails, the arm, the legs, etc. And I've hidden the tail and the equipment. The animation of the tail will mainly rely on the animation of the torso. This is why I'm not displaying the tail right now, because it's pretty big and this is kind of annoying or disturbing when animating. During the initial posing, I mainly focus on the position of the feet and the position of the torso and the center of mass of my character. I will refine the position of the arms, the upper chest and the head later on. So I'm still working on those, but this is not the main focus. I've been struggling a lot on the position of the leg for this rotation effect. Initially, I wanted the left leg to be thrown as a kick, thinking it will give more energy to the movement. But it really didn't improve the readability of the character silhouette in top view, and this was really a problem. So in the end, I've made both legs one close to the other. But this is something I fixed later on. So for the time being, I've blocked my anticipation, then the rotation, and there is a second anticipation before the release of the axe. So what I'm trying to do at each stage is to get nice and clean lines of action. Since she's supposed to rotate on her right, in the first anticipation she's strongly leaning onto her left. There is also a shape contrast. When anticipating she's pretty straight, while she is very curvy when she's rotating. She's also standing very vertically while she was almost laid on the ground horizontally during the anticipation. Once the rotation is finished, there is a second anticipation just before the release of the weapon. In this second anticipation, I will also bring contrast by making her very compressed onto herself, and when she will release the blade, I will stretch her body as much as possible. So I'm just trying to bring contrast in the main shape of my character, and I'm trying to think of her balance. Whenever she's in anticipation, she needs to have a very good balance, while when she's attacking, she needs to kind of lose control, moving forward in an extreme pose that will be easier to read and that will bring power to the motion. Once I'm done with the main blocking, I generally work a bit on the timing of my animation. I just move in time my main poses. I don't move each feature of the rig in time at this moment. This is what I got after the main blocking and a bit of timing. Note that here I haven't taken care of the last poses where she take a new axe in her backpack because I knew it won't be that complicating to make the transition into the idle pose. When I start polishing my animation, I generally first start with the torso controller, but here I was working on this left foot, the one in the air, because I was really struggling to get what I wanted animation wise, and I wanted to fix this first. So I've been trying to polish this to get the right thing I wanted, but it didn't look good in the blocking and neither in the polishing, because this was not the right choice. And this was the time where I thought about artistic skating. Whenever they are rotating really fast, they don't extend their limbs. They try to get as vertical as possible and keep their limbs as close as possible to their body. It was also the moment where I was thinking of the second anticipation, whether to keep it a bit longer so that we have a nice contrast between the spin, anticipation and release, or if we make it very short so that we have the spinning and the release in one movement. Discussing this with my colleague, both ideas were looking cool, but we've decided to make it in one move because this character is supposed to have very smooth and controlled movement as a snake or something like this. So always try to think of the rhythm of your animation, when to break it, when to stop it, when to accelerate it, depending on the behavior of your character and his background. This was also the time where I decided to keep both feet close one to each other, and in this way it looks better to extend the character vertically when she was rotating. This way her whole movement was slowly making sense, and it was like a relief in animation. I spent like 2 hours trying to figure this foot movement, and once it was obvious, the rest of the animation and of the body part was flowing, and it was really easy to guess how to make it move. And this is where I really dived into polishing, and you can see here I'm revising each position in time based on the curves. So this is the right moment to define perfect arcs in your movement, and this is also a time where I will push my poses as extreme as possible. I might be a bit shy during the blocking because the poses are still, so pushing them a lot might look a bit out of balance, but once your character is moving, it's way easier to input extreme position into the animation, because those poses won't last for long, so they will snap into the animation if you add them like on 1 or 2 frames, and it will make your animation way better. Once the whole torso was polished, I've looked after a way to fix the head rotation problem, because sometimes the head was not pointing or looking at the right spot in space, or it has some weird rotation due to the different constraint between the torso, the neck and the head rotation. To do so, I've baked an empty based on the position of the head, and then I've reversed the constraint, making the empty a target for the head to look at using a damped track constraint. From there, the head will be pointing at this empty for the whole animation. Since the animation of this empty is originally based on the animation of the head, it's fine. It's behaving like it was before. But the cool thing is that if I stop the motion of the empty in space, the head will be looking at this point whatever the motion of the rest of the body is. So it's like the head is focusing on this point in space. So if I stop this point in space, whatever the motion of the body, the head will be always looking at this very point. So it was very easy to edit the motion curve of this empty object, and so having my character looking at this very specific point in space while she was throwing her axe. This is the kind of technique I've learned into the animation Sherpa courses by Richard Lico. I truly advise you to take this class, it's really amazing. From there, I've polished my dog leg or Z-leg animation, mostly trying to align the articulation or the joint of the dog leg with the rest of the leg, and always adding a bit of delay whenever it was pushing or pulling the leg, so that we feel like it's pushing on the ground and then the movement goes into the whole leg. Then I've polished the arms, so I generally try to go a little more extreme into my poses, as I said before, and I always add a bit of delay between the forearm and the arm and between the hand and the forearm. When polishing the forearm, its main joint is the elbow, so I generally rotate the forearm only on one axis because your elbow can't rotate on the other axis, although the rotation comes from the shoulder connection. But it doesn't mean that I never input weird rotation. It happens that I overextend the rotation so that we can feel the curvature of the movement, or I slightly break the joint also to create smears or to follow the movement of the whole character. From there I was ready to animate the tail. So what I do generally is that I animate and polish the root of the tail first. Most of the time the tail animation is kind of a counterweight or a follow-through animation, meaning that it will depend on the movement of the main torso and the hips. But I've also used the tail to give more depth to the animation. The idea was to use it as a dancer will use a rebound. Now to get a nice tail motion, what I will use is also space switching. So I will be using different empties that will be copying the rotation of the different joint of the tail. To make this mechanism as efficient as possible, I've slightly customized my usual tail rig. It's using a classical forward kinematic rotation chain, but each joint on the chain will be orientated toward the next one, meaning that rotating the root bone will orientate the tip of the tail, but moving the tip of the tail will also orientate, for example, will also change the orientation of the previous bone in the deformation chain. So it may sound complicated here, but it's a very simple trick and I will cover this in another video. If you don't want to miss it, just subscribe and enable the notification. So once all the empties are baked, I just offset them in time one by one. So I offset them by 1 to 3 frames depending on their position into the chain. So basically those empties have baked the rotation animation of the different joints of the tail, and then I'm constraining the joint of the tail with those empties. Offsetting their rotation will offset the rotation of the tail in time for each joint, and so I will have this curvy effect automatically. The idea here is that each joint is constrained by the empty. I will then bake this animation onto the tail, and then I will clean the tail animation directly on the different tail joint. But here, with not that much effort, I get a very nice base animation for the tail, and then I just need to clean the curves and rework a bit the animation so that it perfectly fits the silhouette of the character. I haven't created those empties by hand. They were automatically created using an add-on by the amazing Finn. I know we're still polishing the alpha version of the add-on, but I'm sure it will be available very soon. I finally polished the animation transition into idle, then I've animated the secondary part, such as the breast of the character, the ropes on the belt, and the hair of the character. For the belt, rope and the breast, I've also used a space switching technique. So I've baked empties following the position of those controllers, and then I've slightly offsetted it in time, and I've polished the movement of those parts working only on the empties. The fact that the empties are in world space is way easier to control the movement when it's an up and down or left to right motion, for example. I've also slightly improved those rope rig and the breast rig to avoid overstretching whenever the position of the locators or the empties goes beyond the limitation of the bone length. So I will also cover those little tips in a next video because there will be too much information in this one. But this way, even if my polishing is not perfect, I won't get weird deformation for the breast or those ropes. Then I worked on all the follow-through animation such as the clothes and the hairs, so I had to do it by hand this time. I've also been working on different facial expression and facial animation whenever she was doing the movement, like a big roar and a big screaming, focusing on her target, etc. This is something that could be hard to be seen in game, but whenever the player will see it, I know they will appreciate that there are those facial expressions. One last feature I haven't really covered during this making of is that I've added some smear effect to the axe whenever it's rotating. So the axe has different bone controllers that allow it to be stretched or curved. This is the kind of trick that allow you to create smear effect and make the animation more readable without using any FXs. Finally, I've animated each finger so that we feel like she's mastering the rotation of this axe around her finger. It might not be super useful, but if anyone is looking at this animation frame by frame, they will be thinking that we add all the detail in there that make it a cool animation, I believe. This is the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If so, please give a like, share it with your friend, and I will see you very soon in another animation and rigging video for Blender. Cheers!